What's going on, everybody? And in today's video, if you can't read, we're going to be ranking every single MXGP game from worst to best. This is all my opinion, so your favorite game might be my least favorite, so don't get too butthurt, but I do want to hear what your guys' list would look like down below, so feel free to comment, and yeah, I hope you enjoy this video.
What the? Julian.
Coming in last place, it should be to nobody's surprise if you've played any MXGP game or all of them, that MXGP 2019 is by far the worst MXGP game, milestone game to have been released. I would rather play Supercross 5 or 4, or even get the new Supercross game than ever play this fucking game again. There is very few good things to say about it. Some of the positives are the graphics are pretty good, and the HUD, the menus, I think they're laid out pretty well. But other than that, man, there is not much good to say about this game. Pretty much everything about this game is utter shite. It is disgusting to look at, not very satisfying to play. The sounds of the bikes just are off in this game. The rider looks goofy as hell, looks worse than Ronnie Mac. The bikes are just glued to the ground, pretty much like someone just took a bunch of jizz and just stuck it to the bottom of the tires. That's basically what it feels like. It's not very satisfying. It's also slippery as hell, so somehow the game's very slippery, like you're on ice skates, and you also just get no air, so it's not really fun. The whips look like shit. They feel like shit. The scrubs are awful. They feel awful. They look terrible. The AI is not too bad in this game. I think it's because it's so easy to crash that they just kind of keep up with you. I believe this was the first MXGP game to introduce a track editor, but if you don't remember, it's pretty terrible. It's the same as it is in any Supercross or MXGP game. It has all your basic jumps, straightaways, but the track, like the maps that it gives you, are flat. There's no elevation, so it's very basic. You can't really design the tracks too well. And yeah, with no elevation, it's very bare bones. The jumps they give you are shit. Overall, the track editor was very forgettable with this game. And in general, this whole game was very forgettable. Multiplayer wasn't fun. Career wasn't fun. This was the one MXGP game that I honestly dislike. I enjoy every other MXGP game, but this one is just, I never enjoyed it. I tried it when it first came out. Didn't enjoy it. I kept trying to come back to it, but I just could not do it. There is nothing good to say about this. I think this should be a free game. It is that terrible. I would strongly recommend to never ever buy this game, never touch it. It will give you AIDS. It is a terrible, terrible game, and it should never be talked about again.
Pizza time.
So next up, this kind of hurts me to say, but MXGP 2014 is the second worst MXGP game to have been made. It is not a bad game, don't get me wrong. This game is not bad, it doesn't suck. It's a decent game. It's kind of outdated at this point. I believe it was made of the 2013 season, so I think it released in 2014. So it's about 8 or 9 years old at this point. It's kind of getting up there in age. It's about to head off to middle school or whatever, you know. But it compares pretty damn well to some of the newer titles, not in every category, but the physics are actually pretty decent, I think. The bike sounds are terrible, the worst sounds we've ever heard. We all know this if you've played it. It sounds like a damn vacuum cleaner. It's pretty horrible to listen to, so the graphics are pretty good for its time, but as the years goes on, a lot of games have surpassed it. It's not the best looking one out there, mainly with the textures in the dirt. And you know what's sad? This game has some better dirt textures than Supercross 5 on some of the tracks. That's a little sad, so there's a good thing to point out about it. The physics are actually not too bad. I like the way the rider moves on the bike. He sits up and down a lot, sticks the leg out a little bit. He has a bit of style, I guess you can say. One thing I enjoy about this game is you can't overjump or case shit, or else your bike just kind of does a half stall or whatever you want to call it. It just stops for a sudden second, and then you can get going. Tries to replicate you casing or overjumping something, and you kind of just bust your nuts, so you have to regather. It's kind of a nice little detail that I always appreciated. The whips in this game are kind of non-existent. It's more of just a scrub. It looks the same every time, very canned. Not the best looking animation, but over a couple jumps, you can get it to look very nice, shave off some time, and it feels pretty good as well. Depends on the jumps, so overall not very great there. This game doesn't have a compound, never released with the DLC compound, so not much to say there. Also does not have MX of Nations, so this game basically is multiplayer, which I believe is no longer in this game. So basically it is career mode at this point, and this game has probably the second best career mode in any MXGP game, I think, so it's kind of a sad, in a way, how they've gone downhill or nowhere with these career modes. The only better thing about it really is that the main hub area is your own desk and office, so it makes it feel a bit more realistic, I guess. I love how before every race it shows a video clip of the track or race in real life. That kind of gets you pumped up, kind of makes you excited, and I wish they kept doing it, but they sadly did not. The AI is pretty terrible in this game, so it's pretty easy to beat them. The collisions are alright. Everything with this game is very basic. The only bad thing about it, again, is the bike sounds. But other than that, the game's not too bad. It can definitely be very fun, but I think it's just a bit outdated at this point, and there's just not enough to keep me playing this game. Not a whole lot of content. It gets boring pretty quickly, especially if you played it before. First person's okay. It's not the greatest, not the worst. It's certainly not as bad as MXGP 2019. Let's get that straight. There is no rain in this game, so it's every race is dry, which I guess you kind of want. But it's nice to have a bit of variety with the rain, and it switches it up once in a while. But yeah, this game doesn't have it, so again, not too much replayability. No two strokes. The 250s are very slow in this game. Overall, it's just a very basic, decent game. And I don't think I have too much else to say. It's not a bad game. Not a great game. It's pretty decent, very mid. But there's just so many other games that are ahead of it. And this is where I believe MXGP 2014 belongs. So yeah, that's all I got to say about this game. Next up, we have MXGP 2. This was kind of a tough decision for me as well. I do really enjoy MXGP 2. I loved it when it released, and coming back and playing it recently, I still enjoy it. It's a very fun game. The physics are a little goofy, clunky, and slow, so you must be saying, how the hell can it be good or fun? It just is. The physics, even though, yes, they can be clunky and slow at times, they work. The power sliding's nice. There's quite a lot of traction, something the newer games just don't really provide. The graphics are very good, especially for the game releasing back in like 2016, so it's kind of getting up there as well in age. It's kind of an old game. I don't think there's any more multiplayer. I'm not too sure about that. Couldn't really find a lobby or connect to the server, so I don't know too much about the multiplayer. First person is a step up from MXGP 1 and miles better than 2019, so yeah, that game, again, that game had a horrible first person. But anyways, MXGP 2 still has the same bike sounds as MXGP 1. The worst bike sounds to ever exist in any motocross game. I don't even want to know what other games might have worse sounds than these two, because they're very bad, and I'm glad that they decided to scrap these sounds after this game and just throw them in the bin, because that's how terrible they are. And yeah, we don't want to talk about them too much. Let's move on. I will say that the scrubs and whips kind of took a step back in MXGP 2. It's the same push the sticks. Actually, wait, this was the first game to push the sticks apart, and it would throw the whip or scrub canned animation. But the animation feels slower, it looks a little goofier, and it just points you in a certain direction and you can't correct it. It often is just going to throw you off the track. There's really no need to use it in MXGP 2. Very few cases where it can look decent or nice. I really never use whips or scrubs in this game. It's just a very pointless thing. It's mainly if you're just bored and want to fuck around, but other than that, scrubs and whips are terrible in this game. I think MXGP 2019 has better scrubs and whips than this game. So does MXGP 1. The career is basically the same as MXGP 1 without the main office hub area. So I would say it's a cock hair worse. It's really the same, but just a tiny bit worse. I like the way the rider looks on the bike, but at times he can look a bit stiff. So maybe the rider animation looks a little bit worse than MXGP 1. It kind of sounds like I'm saying MXGP 1 is better than MXGP 2, but it's just not. The physics, which is the most important part about these games, they're just more fun to play in MXGP 2. This was the first game to introduce a compound. It's not the greatest compound. The Supercross track's okay. The National track's okay. I don't think you can do races on them if I'm mistaken. One of my favorite things about MXGP 2 though, it has a stadium series. 4, I would say, very simple Supercross tracks that Milestone made for us. It was free, released with the game. I had a lot of fun with the stadium series over the years, especially when the game released. Even though the tracks are kind of basic and there's not too many different line choices, it's just a nice addition to the game. It adds replayability. It's fun to mess around on, and I bet if multiplayer was still around, it would be quite fun. But even against the bots, I enjoy it. It's a nice change up from just racing on the same national tracks every time. If you get bored of those, come over to the Stadium Series, do some races on them. Funny enough, I think the tracks work quite well with the physics, even though there's no ruts or terrain deformation in this game. The Stadium Series was just a good little integration, and I wish they kept going with it because this was the only game that Milestone ever made. Any Supercross tracks for the MXGP series. I hope if they make another MXGP game or a Pro Motocross game, they would add in a Stadium Series. It's just something that should be in every MXGP game, I think. I believe this was the first MXGP game to introduce a Motocross of Nations. The 2015 Motocross of Nations, that was held at France, I believe. But you can choose from a few different tracks if you want. It's not the best track ever, but again, it's just another mode that should be in the game. Adds replayability, and if you're from a different country, like, I don't know, Italy or wherever the hell in the world, and you want to give them the win in Motocross of Nations, you can. So yeah, I wish they would kept going with the Motocross of Nations 2, because they took it out in MXGP 3, which was the last game to have it, I believe. So yeah, MXGP 2 introduced a few new features, but then after that, they kind of got rid of them again. So it's a little sad, but MXGP 2 is a decent game. Definitely not the greatest game out there. Definitely not the worst. It's pretty mid-tier, and I think it's a lot of fun. If you find a good deal on the Steam store or wherever you want to play it, I think you should pick it up. It's a fun game, and that's pretty much all I have to say about this one.
Actually, the statistical take.
Now, some people may be very pissed off at me for putting MXGP Pro up next. I think MXGP Pro and MXGP 2019 are by far the least favorite in the whole entire series from everybody. MXGP Pro was very disliked by many people, but I am one of the very few people that will ride this game's cock until I die. I enjoy it. Even coming back and playing it, I just really enjoy this game. I don't know. I guess I can understand why people do hate it for sure. It's a very slippery game if you don't manage the throttle, and I think this game had a lot of hype when it was releasing. They were marketing it as a kind of towards a simulator. I believe Caroli and Geiser helped work on the game's physics, which isn't definitely not it's not the best idea because they ride dirt bikes, they don't make video games. So everybody was kind of hyped, especially myself, for the if there's gonna be terrain deformation, whips and scrubs, you know, insane tracks and physics and all that shit. But I will admit that the game definitely under-delivered. There was no terrain deformation. It was only a visual, and it wasn't the greatest, so the tracks didn't deform. If you were to do a 30-lap race, the tracks would not deform. The scrubs are okay in this game. They can look okay. They can feel decent on some jumps, but they don't look the best. There's not a whip in this game. It's just the scrub animation. The one thing I do like about it is that it's very quick, so I guess that's the only positive, but it's definitely not a great animation. It's more towards the bottom list of these games. I'd say it's better than MXGP 2, MXGP 2019, and maybe MXGP 1, but other than that, I don't think I can put it any higher. This game had a pretty decent compound, I think, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people hated it. It's coming back and playing it. It looks very beautiful with the graphics cranked on high on PC. A lot of good visuals. It's in the woods, so there's a path all the way down the center of the woods. It looks pretty nice. There's a few little mediocre trails. They're not the best. I do enjoy the national track. It's built pretty well for what the game is, but track deformation definitely would help that. It has a supercross track, which is basic. It's not the greatest, but the national track, I think it's built pretty well. I enjoy coming back and doing races on it. I wouldn't say the compound is great. I wouldn't say it's bad. I'd say it's very mid. You can get maybe an hour on it before you get really bored. So it's got some replayability, but not the best. You can do compound races, which is a nice little addition, but it should have been an MXGP 3 or 2 whenever the compounds were introduced. So it definitely took a little while for that. First person is kind of an odd one in this game. I think the angle is a good one, but the front handlebars just twitch way too much back and forth. It's basically like you're doing a tiny little speed wobble, and it throws your mind off a little bit. So I think the camera's right, but it just feels a bit off. And with the game having a slippery feel to it, first person probably isn't the best to use in this game. I think the game definitely is way too slippery. I wouldn't recommend running this game in pro physics because you slide way too much. You slide out and fall off the bike constantly. Even if you just barely touch the throttle, you're probably going to spin out. So again, it's very frustrating, so I wouldn't recommend having pro physics. And also, if you overjump something by a cock hair or case something barely, you're flying off the bike, crashing. That was another big problem that this game had. But if you don't want to deal with that, just put on standard physics or assisted physics, whatever it's called. Then it gets rid of the crazy slippery feel. Still feels a little slippery though, and it also gets rid of the casing and overjumping stuff, barely and crashing. So yeah, pro physics are not it in this game. Standard physics are just the way to go. Once you play on them, the game is a lot more enjoyable. The rain looks so damn sexy, fucking sexier than Kimi Granger, Alexis Texas, Bella Danger, Lisa Ann all combined. It is the rain looks orgasmic in this game. I could just bust thinking about it right now. Very good rain. I think it was it was the second game to introduce it, but it looked very good. There was lots of puddles on the tracks as well, so that was a nice touch. The AI can actually be pretty decent on a couple of tracks. I think it also could do with the fact that it's very easy to crash. But I remember on the Qatar night track, when I would do the pro career, which is a full distance moto, sometimes I would lose on this track because the AI actually keep up with you pretty well. And it's not on every track, of course, just the very select few. I can't remember for the life of me if this game had any DLC. I forgot to check, and I'm too damn lazy to go back and check right now. But I can't remember this game having any DLC. I think this game had 2 strokes, so that was a nice touch. I believe they were all free. The career mode kind of sucked because you couldn't join custom teams. That was a bit of a letdown. There was no other side modes that the game had to offer. No Motocross of Nations, which blowed because it would have been very cool in this game. But other than that, though, man, I think that's all I got to say for MXGP Pro. Very underrated game. I will blow this game until I die. I enjoy it. Yes, it's not the best, but it's definitely not the worst. I think so. But I think my opinion is definitely outweighed by the many others that dislike this game. So MXGP Pro, this is where I'm putting it. Up next, we have MXGP 2020. This is one of my favorite motocross games out there. It is a very, very good game. I wouldn't argue with anybody that puts it in number 1, 2, or 3. I think that's the right spot for this game to land. Any lower than that, I respectfully disagree with your opinion. There isn't a whole lot of negatives to say about this game. It was definitely the worst launching MXGP Milestone Supercross game out there. It released pretty unfinished. It had no first person, no track editor, and I believe it was missing 3 tracks. So yeah, it released a little bit unfinished, which was kind of disappointing. So some people like myself had to wait a month or 2 just to get all the tracks and first person, which was kind of a letdown. And that also meant that they didn't release any sort of DLC for this game at all. So everything that was post-patch with this game, it should have been released at launch, because MXGP 2019 had a track editor. This game didn't at launch. MXGP 2019 had first person, it had all the tracks. So yeah, this game, very shaky launch. It has the same Oppo whip mechanic that was introduced in Supercross 3, and I think that in-air physics system works very well with the MXGP games. They need to scrap it for the Supercross series because it doesn't work for those games at all. You can make some decent looking whips and scrubs. The whips not so much, but the scrubs, if you do the scrub glitch, you can keep the bike very fucking low and shave off some time on your laps. One thing I appreciate with MXGP 2020 is you have to use the clutch a good amount, I'd say, to control the throttle so you don't slide out, and also to give your guy a little bit of a boost coming out of corners. If you get the feeling of it, you can definitely increase your lap times. This game looks spectacular. Graphically speaking, of course, it's very sexy. The rain is a bit disappointing. It's kind of lackluster. The tracks don't really get muddy or wet or anything, and the raindrops are very hard to spot. So the rain kind of took a step back, I would say. But obviously we don't race in the rain every single race, so it's not the end of the world. The track editor is decent. It's basically the same as it was in MXGP 2019. But it's far better because the maps they give you have elevations, so you're able to create much more fun tracks and get a good variety going. But my god, the compound, it might just be the worst compound they've ever made. The tracks are so poorly put together. You can tell they just slammed those bitches together in about 5 minutes each. They're basically just a bunch of fucking tight turns, no sort of flow going on the tracks, no huge jumps. It's just a little, yeah, the compound was very lackluster, and coming back and playing it, it's still super bad. It's not fun to play, and it might be the worst one they've ever made. I love first person in this game. It feels a bit more realistic than any of the previous titles, I would say. From these games on forward, it kind of, they've definitely improved on them. But first person can kind of still feel a little off just because the back end is a tiny bit slippery, so sometimes you can't really tell what's going on back there, and I wouldn't strongly recommend using first person, but it's fun to switch it up once in a while. This game has a nice floaty bounce feel to it. You get a lot of airtime, but if you learn how to do the wheelie and scrub glitch, you can stick pretty low to the ground. So there is a couple exploits with the game, obviously. The AI is decent. They're not great. They're not bad. But once you figure the game out, you can beat them pretty easily on all the tracks. Now this game sadly doesn't have track deformation. Not even like a visual track deformation, so it's kind of a little sad that they stopped working with terrain deformation. I wish they would just make a good one and bring it with these games, because it could be something special. But yeah, no terrain deformation, but that's not really surprising. I wasn't able to find any multiplayer lobbies because obviously these games die within a couple weeks, especially on PC. No one fucking plays them on PC. But I remember having a good amount of fun with the multiplayer in this game. The servers seemed to be decent if you had great internet, but if nobody plays it, I can't really judge it too much now. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say with MXGP 2020. It is a pretty good game. I don't think it's worth, you know, 80, 60 bucks, but 40 bucks or less, great deal. Usually these games are on sale, so I picked up for like fucking $10, something like that, and that's a good damn deal. Great fucking deal. This was the first game where my channel kind of got some views on, and it kind of holds a bit of nostalgia in my heart, even though it's only a couple years old. But at the same time, it's just a great game. I really do enjoy it. The two strokes are fun to ride on, even though they're a little bit slow and shit in this game. It's a nice change up. I would say MXGP 2020 is on the easier side to learn. It's not very difficult like MXGP Pro or MXGP 2019. It's a pretty easy game, and the physics, they just work. This is where MXGP 2020 belongs. In second place, we have MXGP 2021. I absolutely love this game. It is essentially a much improved MXGP 2020. Basically everything that game had to offer, it was improved on in MXGP 2021. The compound is actually fucking awesome in this game. You can tell they put a lot more effort into it than in MXGP 2020. There's a couple national tracks, pretty long, good amount of elevation. They actually have some big jumps on them, and there's even a couple things for the enduro lovers on the compound, like some tires and shit like that. And the trails, they did a really good job with the trails in the woods. They put a bit more effort into it, and there's a nice open land just to send off the big fucking hills. So yeah, the compound in MXGP 2021 might be the best one they've ever created. It's really good compound, and you can tell they put a lot more effort into it. First person is pretty much the same as in MXGP 2020, but I think since the physics are a slight bit different, it just seems to work a little better. The camera is basically the same, but the way the bike moves around, it's just a little bit better, and you can customize first person and third person cameras in this game, so that is a good little touch. They tweaked the bike sound slightly in this game from the previous last few Supercross and MXGP games, so again, that was a nice little change that was needed. It wasn't the biggest one, but it was definitely noticeable. I think the rider looks very good on the bike. He looks a little loose, not too tight. He moves around a good bit, and he looks a little bit realistic. The bikes feel amazing in this game. There's a lot of traction in this game, which is something obviously a lot of these games seem to miss. It has more traction than MXGP 2020. Yes, it has a little bit of the slip again, but definitely not as much as a lot of the other MXGP games. One of my favorite things about this game is how much the clutch actually affects the bike. Whenever you tap it coming out of corners, you get a nice boost, and also